I'm Amber Leidick, your host, and this is the Art of Equine Alchemy podcast. This podcast bridges the gap between science and spirituality in the equine industry. Through healing journeys and real stories shared by courageous and unfiltered individuals at the forefront of these shifts, we explore how they reclaimed their power, found their voices for themselves and their horses, and how the work they do paves a road that gives permission for everyone else to do the same. Our intention is to lead a shift within the equine industry that challenges outdated traditions and methods that no longer align with our updated understandings of the horses and humans, mind, body, and spirit. Our mission is to create an expansive platform and community, online and in person, to connect with conscious and compassionate people in the equine industry who have the courage to speak up on the behalf of the horses. Thank you for being here. Together, we can be the voice they do not have. Welcome, everybody, to the Art of Equine Alchemy podcast. Today, we have the lovely Tara Davis. And I got a random flashback this morning when I know Shaylee and I have talked to you on the Tea Time podcast, but I was like, oh, this is how we met like
It
so many
is.
years
It is
ago on
how
a
we met.
podcast. And I didn't even know
And
who you were at all. So this
you
is
quite
very
literally said, I have this event in my heart that I really want to bring to fruition, and you should totally be a part of it. And I was like, hell yes, let's do this.
Yeah, and that was in like a very long, like 2022 or something.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. You're
Took a
doing
couple of years. Took a couple of years.
it. A long gestation.
Yes, long gestation. It's fine. It's here now. So share with the people who you are and what you do in the world.
Oh gosh, such a nuanced
I know.
answer to that always. I feel like kind of a little bit of a jack of all trades right now where I'm kind of allowing myself to be pulled in a couple different directions. And my baseline work is doing like a whole horse liberty approach. I offer online classes, in-person clinics, but that's kind of been slowly moving more towards online as I feel really called to be able to help people in like a long-term format. So I really like being able to not just have, a couple intensives, but rather be able to, help people understand how to holistically help their horse and holistically meaning like from a whole, being able to address so many different parts of the horse's life and also being able to help address the human aspect of it. So that's been like my heart core work that I've really loved doing. And it blends, behavior science, learning science, movement science, and also kind of with a heavy dose of spirituality all throughout it because, we need to know all the science. We need to know all of this cerebral conscious work and then be able to also tap into that deeper unconscious knowing and the deeper understanding and the understanding of the horse and the horse collective and being able to kind of like pull information from that into the kind of like sciencey work that we do as well. Adjacent to that, kind of also raising my own herd of horses here at the ranch and being able to offer a again a holistic lifestyle for the horses that allows them to grow and expand and become all that they're destined to be and kind of giving them a beautiful, healthy start and being able to help people around the world find their partners through all of this beautiful magical herd that I've been surrounded with, luckily. Yeah, and let's see, what else do I do? I do a lot of stuff. I really have been enjoying playing with more written work lately too. I kind of moved away from teaching writing for so long because there had been, it's a little tough out there in the world. You kind of see what most people want, and I'm never going to be willing to give that to people. And there's been such a shift since I began this work, like, gosh, what was it, 8 years ago now? My heart clients, right? Like the people who I feel I'm being called to teach, being called to work with, and I feel so lucky that that's something that I'm able to do. Those aren't just Liberty people. They aren't just people whose horses either can't be ridden or won't be ridden. These are I'm getting called to work with these incredible people whose horses are asking to be ridden and whose people are willing to ride but want to ride in a different way. So it's been really, really touching to be able to offer that to people because it's been something that I've dived into over the last 5 years of really being able to explore what does it look like being able to ride a horse in full authenticity and truly, consenting bidirectional communication. And it's been really fun getting to play with that a lot more in the last, couple of years. And yeah.
There's a common theme with everyone, and which is why I feel like all of you are at this event because everyone sort of has it, where it's this balance of you can have that relationship that's really beautiful and also do the things that you want to do, given that all of the parts are functioning and feels like within the space, it's like there's this like swing from full on entitlement where the horses are tools and they are a byproduct and they get thrown away. And then the other end is like people are feeling so guilty about riding their horses and they're like, they only need to live out in the pasture with their friends. It's the only way they're going to be happy. They shouldn't be ridden. And it's beautiful because all of you sort of embody that. Like there is a space for, where they want to go play with you. They want to do the things so long as like it's done in a way that's like honoring everybody. And I think that's what people really need to see happening because I feel like sometimes people think it's either or and it's like there's this entire space in between that's magic.
So much gray space and there's so much beauty in there. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, but I feel like there's a necessity to some degree of having a pendulum swing. I know for me, that was a huge part of my journey of being able to go from like one extreme of
Mhm.
like modern German dressage, very forceful, like the horse, I am entitled to everything the horse can give me and more, and I'm not even going to be meeting their basic needs, despite, thinking that I am. Um, to, the full pendulum swing. And I had to have like, I had to have a horse that would take me to that place that would be like, I, in fact, will never give you what you want if you don't
Mhm.
go all the way to this other end of the spectrum. And I think that there's there's a really important lesson for humans in being able to be able to understand the spectrum of going all the way to that opposite direction and being able to like sit in that space.
Mhm.
And I think there's a huge element of like having to forgive yourself
Mhm.
once you kind of open your eyes and you see what's going on and having to go, the polar opposite of that in order to heal. And I think also there's an element of, I feel if I had had mentors through that process, it would have been a much easier process for me. And my horses obviously are, my greatest teachers through all of this. And I obviously could never replace them. That's something that like any mentorship that I offer can never replace the true guidance and leadership of the horse and the teachings that they have to offer. But I do desperately feel that if I had a mentor that I could have asked about the process, asked about, how to heal yourself from the trauma that we have inflicted in the past and that we're holding deeply in our hearts now as empathetic horsemen and horsewomen. It's yeah, I feel like that's why I feel so called to allow kind of a general openness for like I'll meet you where you are because I want to help those people who, maybe need guidance towards the other end of the spectrum or who, need guidance more towards the middle end of the spectrum. But really, yeah, I feel really lucky to be able to offer that to people because I see so much of the very lonely journey I went through, many years ago of like, oh God, how do I I felt very strongly that much of what I've done has been an apology to the horses that I've worked with before. And also, like we were discussing earlier, the energy of that, of like moving through the world, like apologizing in advance
Mhm.
for everything that's happened before and everything that might happen in the future. The energy of that is powerful and can really can negatively impact. Obviously, we want to move through the world with grace and humility and forgiveness. And also if we're constantly bearing that heavy weight of like almost beating ourselves up or actually beating ourselves up for what we've done or what we might do or what we might in the future learn and
Mhm.
look back and say like could we have done it this way. And that's where allowing the horse to be the North Star through all of it, really keeping us true to our center. And also, can we have a herd around us of humans that can help us to learn how to forgive ourselves, learn how to move forward with integrity, learn how to, help our horses and meet their needs and be able to engage with them in the way that they want, which is for us to be present with ourselves. I love how you talk about like letting go of the stories and having all of these lessons that we've carried with us in the past and taking those lessons and moving forward with it, but not letting those lessons kind of like weigh us down. I feel like that's what that mentorship is such a key part of that.
Yeah. And I feel like we've all kind of had those swings where I went from like cow horse cutting, where it was like, pull around, kick up, and the horses that I went through that with are still my horses and the ones I still have. And then when I was like, I can't do this anymore this way, I know. And then I did swing. So I hadn't ride my horses for a long time, but I still deeply craved to go do the things with them that I know that they do enjoy. So
Mhm.
it was like how to have someone that could have led. I had, it's like, I feel like I had started finding you guys when it would be like, I can't ride my horses. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not a trainer. I don't know. I don't even know how to touch my horses anymore. So it's like going first, right? When you're going to hold the space for the people to be able to work through that, you kind of have to go through it yourself first so that
Yeah,
you
yeah,
deeply
totally.
understand where they're at. And like, I know this feels like shit right now. I swear you're
Mhm.
gonna be fine. Um, so I think that yeah, that's beautiful. And also, I feel like we've all had that horse that was like a hard no, where it was
Mhm.
like, my body will not let you, and I actually, as a being, will not let you, like a twofer,
Yeah.
because that's mine was like, I'm gonna have this physical thing, and also mentally. I will never shut down and I will fight you to the end until you learn this. And finally, I was like, oh, I get it. I get it. I get it. And it's beautiful now. So that kind of leads us into that question of, do you have a horse that you feel like that you want to share the story of that was so significant for you that I know there's probably multiple because we all have multiple, but the one that you want to speak about in this moment that sort of took you to that place where it kind of burned down all of those illusions where you really had to like take a look at yourself.
Yeah. My constant with one, the heart one. Her name is Misa, and she's the muse behind Unbridled Goddess. When I created that name, that was her. So it is her. All of the lessons that I give, and that the words that I put forth all come from the lessons that she taught me. So I guess I'll just start from the beginning. I had kind of left horses completely because I had to retire my like incredibly talented, incredibly wonderful warm blood who should have been, and of course now looking back, I'm like I could have helped that horse a lot more, but should have been like Olympic level quality. I mean, he was just incredible. He was spectacular and so broken and so mentally fried from people and so traumatized that he ended up having to be retired at a very young age. And I just was so heartbroken over feeling like I couldn't get through to him. Like I always felt like I could kind of try and I would like kind of go off on this like hippie kind of, childish road with him and then, would want to compete somewhere and my coaches and my instructors and my trainers would be like, you have to do this. And he would just get fried. So I gave up on him. I retired him and he's happy, like he's living the good life, but that really broke my heart and I kind of like moved away from horses completely. I did the full pendulum swing instead of like I'm going to put my horses out in pasture and just watch them. I was like I'm going to give all my horses away and throw away all of my horse equipment and I'm never going to touch a horse ever again. And of course that lasted for like a very short time.
I changed my mind. I changed my mind.
Exactly. Yeah, my husband, who is my very new boyfriend at that point was like, let's get horses. And I was like, okay, cool. Sounds good. He wanted to do backcountry packing. And I was like, cool, that's the farthest possible thing from competitive horse riding that I could possibly do. Like that sounds wonderful. You can't really like, you can't get any more at that point in my life. I was like, you can't get any more like natural than that. So we got some horses and then I was looking for a pack horse and I saw a gosh, I think she was $250. She was on, at this point, Facebook, you could like list animals for sale. That was back in the day. And I saw her for $250 on Facebook. And the ad was like, she packed salt. She is a little bit nervous, anxious, needs a specific type of person, but like, yeah,
Mm.
she's ready to ride or be a pack horse. That's fantastic. So I got in the car and drove 18 hours down to visit her. And I have this like vivid, I can like smell the dirt. I can see every single detail of that moment. We got in super late and we're driving down, windows are down, and I come around the corner and there's like dust coming up from the car down this dirt road, and there's a round pen and there's a big like construction light behind the round pen, and it's illuminating and throwing these long shadows on this horse that is just bolting around the round pen, just nonstop. There's no person in there. The person's like behind the light, and this horse is just running. And it was like it just touched me in I was like, that's my horse. That's absolutely, there's my horse right there. And yeah, I came back the next day and she had to be roped by a foot in order to touch her. And to be able to rope her, you had to have her in the round pen and you had to run her for a long time. And then they showed me how to, I didn't know how to rope. I was a dressage rider. And they're like, so here's how you do it. You rope her foot and then you hobble her and then you can put a halter on her. And I'm like, I will never be doing this again. So I'm just like gonna be a good student here and I'm gonna like listen, but I'm never doing this whatsoever. Um, and she was like terrified of people. I mean, they had her hobbled and she was stretched back as far as her legs could move away in whichever direction opposite of the person, shaking and sweating. And they're like, yeah, she's done really great with 250 pounds of salt on her back. And you could just get on and ride her probably, first month you get home. And I'm like, yeah, totally. Naive as can be. I'm like, this horse just needs like a gentle touch and a little bit of more effective pressure and release. Because back then, like I didn't even know what positive reinforcement training was. And yeah, I somehow brought her home. And before I did, took a couple weeks to get down there with a trailer and bring her back because they were like, we don't know how we're going to get this horse on a trailer. Had to build a chute for her. And in that time, I kind of had a couple of weeks to reflect on this horse and bringing her home. And it felt so profound at that time, which is interesting because I didn't really recognize at the time why it felt so profound. And I had a really intense moment of just being like, I know that this horse, I'm being told that this is how I'm going to have to work with this horse, and I'm never going to do that to her. I can't do that to her. I'm not going to rope her. And I made this promise, of course, again, so naive, that I was never going to do any of this stuff to her. And that's why I started an account to document her progress, and I called it Unbridled Goddess because I never wanted to harness her without her, full, complete consent. And then she showed me exactly how I had to stick to my guns with that promise that I made her because I brought her home and I unloaded her into a 2.5 acre pasture and I did months. I was like, yeah, no, just like put a little pressure on her. And when she turns and faces up, I'll just release and, work slowly towards it. And that horse was off into the farthest corner the second she saw a person. She was so terrified. And it really took like fully humbling myself and being like, I will move at whatever pace you need. I clearly none of this is working. Clearly none of the training that I'm doing is working. I'm literally Googling like how to gentle a wild Mustang in a big pasture. There was no, at that time, there was no resources for how to do this. So I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna do it how the horse tells me I should do it. And so I would go and sit with her and just listen and kind of pick up on how my body language had to change and how she changed when I stopped trying to ask anything of her. And asking even just meant like looking at her in her general direction, wondering if she'll look over at me. I had to strip everything so bare and really just become okay with anything. Like just I have no goals, you know, I have no expectations of her. If she just sits in this pasture and I pay board for her until the day she dies, like so be it. That's totally okay. And the second that shift happened, she changed completely. And it was it took a long the process itself took a long time, but it was amazing how quick that shift was and the way things started to change on an actual level when that shift happened. And, it was her being curious about me and like opening up that curiosity once I stopped projecting my own agenda onto her and learning how to exist within that space of that, like that mutual curiosity, like, oh, who are you? What do you want to do? How can I interact with you in a way that feels pleasant for both of us? And it was this really beautiful, I've had her for almost 10 years now. And our dynamic or the lessons she has for me has shifted over time so beautifully. And she's still there, like holding me accountable to maintaining that complete lack of agenda, having to just have an open heart and an open mind for her. And yeah, she keeps me really honest with that because there's so many times you go out and you're like, well, I'm not trying to do anything. I'm just gonna go out there and whatever happens, happens. And she'll tell me every time, like, no, you're actually holding really tightly to something here that you want to happen, and I need you to let that go. Um, so yeah, she taught me everything that I know about well, I won't say everything that I know about positive reinforcement now because I have gone I have done a lot more education, but it's been amazing to look back and realize like all of those things that I now have corroborated through education. I'm like, she taught me all of that already. Like I knew all of these processes and the idea of like behavior modification and all this. And she taught me on an energetic level what that looked like and how to approach it in a way that, you know, didn't have this like A plus B equals C mentality and how this kind of beautiful amorphous approach to learning and growing and how it is required to have a spiritual aspect of it. You cannot just in a sterile environment change a horse's behavior, or you can make behavior changes, but that it isn't at the heart of the horse until we are in the heart of the horse with them, making those changes alongside them. So yeah, that's my horse that really shook it up. He's giving a round of applause for Misa.
Yeah, you know what's so interesting about it? It's like the accountability piece that really people struggle with, right? It's like I feel like the theme in traditional horse land is like, yes, you do XYZ and you get this behavior and this is how you get there. But
Mhm.
it's like people forget that they're these beings with like free will and also have their own opinions and their own feelings and their own sense of safety that needs to be honored. And
Yeah.
the horses that give you the hard no and totally hold you accountable are the ones that are really teaching. And those are the ones that I feel like if people understood how grateful they should be for those horses in those moments, they would be so much less stressed about changing it or finding a trainer to fix his behavior. Because
Well,
even my same, my same little red guy, literally, if I go out into that pasture still, I've had him since he was untouched, like a little feral stud colt with all these brood mares for the first year, and I see he's like the breeding that I want, all the things. I'm gonna go show this horse and all these things. And so I finally like work with him. I can't get near him. So finally we end up just putting him in the trailer so I could bring him home. But for the first 2 months, it would take me like 20 minutes just to catch him in the stall. And he had, I'm thinking he's unhandled. No one's ruined him, quote
Yeah.
unquote, and he was like, nope, I know. But even till this day, he now is 11. And I'll go out into the pasture and I'll have that thought in the back of my head, like, do like how how rigid am I am in this moment of needing to catch you because whoops, the farrier's coming. I probably should have left you in the stall. But it brings up that thing in me every time, even though now I mean, he hasn't done that to me for probably 2 years.
Mhm.
He'll look at me and I'm like, oh, and I'm like, fuck. But it pokes at all of that old stuff, and in that moment, I have this opportunity to be like, ugh, the worst is going to happen as he moves away and she can come back next week or whatever. But it's like the constant, like the lessons don't stop. They just kind of shift and change. But the holding accountable 10 years later is something that I feel deeply in my soul because
Yes.
he fully does that.
Yeah.
Even now, I'm like, but when you get entitled and you're like, I've had you this whole time. I've started you. I'm a trainer. People hire me to catch horses in big areas. Like I can't tell you how many times I have been hired to do that and can do it pretty quickly and like prided myself in that. So then I
Mhm.
end up with this horse who's like, bah, sucker. And I'm like, oh my God. Uh, so yes,
Um,
I feel like if people really fully understood and heard stories of those moments, they would have that opportunity to be able to slow down and go, oh, but what is this actually teaching me right now? Like,
mhm.
how is this making me feel? And like, what is it bringing up for me? And investigate and get curious about that. It's very ego ratifying, like, um, but freeing once you start to like look through that stuff and
Yeah.
realize, oh, like I can have this deep connection. And when those horses go yes to you, you're like, oh,
Oh my God,
like,
it's amazing. It is. I think there's something too that I'll mention just because it's been coming up lately that I've had a couple clients with horses like the horses that challenge you, the horses that make you go like, am I am I completely talentless? Is this some do I just have no hope and I'll just like sell all my horses and I can't do this anymore. I've had clients recently, a couple of them who've had those type of horses and they've seen and they've heard the stories of people like, like Misa or like your red horse. It's like, if you can just get right with yourself and practice accountability and you practice being able to understand the horse and see them and respect them, that magic happens and it's so beautiful and all this stuff. And I've had a couple recently where it's been, they've expressed to me how they feel inadequate within themselves because they are not getting that despite working really hard, despite endless education and endless, self introspection and all this work. And it's interesting that it keeps coming up lately, but that the lesson too is also that like that the horse's behavior is a communication regardless, and we cannot fix everything within ourselves in order to fix something that's outside of ourselves. Like we could do endless internal work, and yet this horse might be calling us to look deeper into what's going on physically or mentally and or emotionally. That oftentimes I find that the cases that are not seeing the results, there is some sort of like physical
mhm,
manifestation that's happening. And that's also been a tough lesson that has been reflected, interestingly enough, with Misa in the last couple of years, where she's been having physical issues come up and recognizing how like I can't fix those physical issues through spiritual work, through training,
mhm.
through loving her to death. I cannot fix her through that, and that I need to be able to listen to what she's telling me and be able to honor that and help her in the ways that I can. And so that's just something that I wanted to bring up because now it's in the back of my head every time I tell stories like this of like, I don't want to invalidate someone else's experience of feeling like I've had that horse and I couldn't help them. There are
Mhm.
absolutely, I've had them and I've had to let them go. And it's tragic and so painful when that happens. And also they have beautiful, incredible, powerful lessons, and they came to you to choose you in order to give you that lesson and be able to take that and to, alchemize it into the lessons that other horses will be able to benefit from, that other humans will be able to benefit from. And so I love that alchemize came up when we're on Equine Alchemy podcast. But truly that I think there's an element of alchemy that comes from learning from another being, and also the lessons of joy and grief and pain and heartbreak and ecstasy and all of these, they're all on the same page, that we're able to take that alchemy and turn it into something that can benefit the greater collective.
Yeah, and I love that at the beginning of this conversation there was a little bit of like when we're talking about the pendulum and when you're swinging into guilt and you're like, "Oh my gosh, like what have I done?" And you have these horses where you're like, "Oh my gosh, like either I didn't know what I knew then and I could have totally helped that horse, but now, I had to help them transition and let them go and oh my gosh, if I would have known." Like
Mhm.
the idea of going, they chose you for that time and space and that experience was supposed to happen exactly how it did
Yeah.
so that you could pull it forward into the horses that will come before you or in your future. And but the ability to not hold yourself in guilt and use grace with yourself. Shaylee and I just did an entire podcast last week about that because it was like, what is forgiveness? She's like, I don't know if I know
Mm.
how to forgive myself. And we kind of like stripped it away and we're talking about it's that level of like grace that you can have with yourself is the amount of grace that you can hold for others and other horses and in that space and to be able to feel worthy of it, of like I am worthy of forgiveness because now I can, there's a bigger picture here and then you can really honor the horse that came forward to teach you that stuff in that way instead of being like, oh no, it's like, no, wait a minute. They're not your victim. They chose your ass. They knew you could handle it and they came with it and, use it.
And they knew that you'd
Like,
listen.
yeah. Yeah.
That's the critical part too, is like, yeah, being willing to listen and not getting so, sucked into like, did I meditate enough for the session? It's like, okay, well, listen to what the horse is telling you in this moment, like, and
Mhm.
being able to discern, and that's hard. And that's why,
Mhm.
having mentors who've gone through the fires is helpful.
Yeah, definitely. So, this question is just so broad and I ask it just because and I do forewarn all of you lovely ladies, but if you had one thing that you could change within the industry that you feel like would be the most impactful, like what do you think that you would choose if you had a magic wand? What would that be?
Oh, well, that's really funny actually that my sentence ended and then this question came up. I completely forgot the order of the questions, but I had looked over the questions and been like, I'll think of this one thing, like that one question. It is. Everything else, I'll try to just have it be like organic. But the 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 thing that I had chose was that people across industries, whether it's farriers, vets, trainers, your amateur horse people, that they could learn to listen a little bit more deeply to what the behavior of the horse is saying. That idea can range from everything to someone being like, oh, like my horse is such a bitch, or my horse is just like so rude, or whatever all these like human attributes we give to the horse that are a amalgamation of all of these behaviors that give us this idea of what the horse is at its core. It ranges from that all the way to vets being like, oh, this is just how a stallion behaves, or oh, this is just how mares are, or this is just how a horse that has difficulty under saddle is, and it's a training issue, it's not a pain issue. All the way to, farriers being like, this is the behaviors that you're seeing are not related to the feet because this is a normal foot here. I think if we just shifted that one thing, so much would change. I mean, horses are communicating with us all the time. and our ideas of what their personalities are so deeply related to what they're experiencing internally and the interactions that they're having externally, and being able to look at that as a whole and say, what is this saying about this horse's experience? What is their current behavior saying about this horse's experience? And how can we look at behavior as communication, which is what it is, rather than, a personality trait or a character flaw, which so much of behavior is written off as a character flaw. Um, so yeah, that would be my one shift. And I love that it ended up being what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, that's like such a it's so interesting that I feel like the way that the things are shifting within the industry, even just being able to have these conversations um and on social media, I don't know if it's just my algorithms or just more people are talking about it, where it's like there is a space where that is how it looks, so in hopes that that would grow. But it is interesting the way people are raised. I find it interesting that is really the way that horsemanship kind of was. You know what I mean? And
There's
then there's a shift for the humans and the way humans are being raised with like conscious parenting and just acknowledging that there are small humans with their own damn emotions and like we can honor that and also not raise assholes. It's kind of like interesting that the horsemanship space is shifting at the same time. And so I think it's definitely the right time for all this to happen, but it is so on the people. It's our responsibility to kind of do that and be the voices for all of that because we have voices. So,
Yeah, and it's on us to learn to, unwind all the or take off the lenses that through which we see the world, based on these like older practices of like this is how things were, and we have to like identify and look at each lens and go, does this fit with the like honest understanding of the world as it stands now with the information that we have, and either
mhm.
chuck it or keep it or put it in the back.
What's beautiful about that is like the within the event when people buy a ticket, they get a portal and it takes them through stages of the transformation within alchemy. And so first is being the fire. And what you were just speaking to is like the sifting through the ashes. Like after all of that goes away, you get to identify like, wait a minute, how do I actually feel about this? Is it honoring the way that it is versus what I've been told how it is? So how does it feel to me? And you get to choose like which practices you do feel good. And then that the third piece just being the integration of like now I can find my voice and my power and not worry if people are going to push back against it and stay in that old space and they're going to fight for that because it feels comfortable and certain and and we're stepping into a place where we're like, well, actually, but actually we can look at we're doing it. So it is in fact a thing.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's my biggest thing and my biggest intention for this event was to be able to bring the people that are doing that actively and being successful at it to show others that it can be done, take them through a process they could find their own way, and then also just take it out into the world, whether it's talking to, another boarder at a barn or, not feeling people had to have this like big platform to speak on or, like you can just spark these little seedlings everywhere just by having these small conversations and being really rooted in how you feel about it. Like that is enough. Like that gets to be huge. Um, and so yeah, I love that piece of the sifting through and being like, wait a minute, like I know I've been told this my whole life, but is it? You get to question it and you get to decide.
And really, you have to question it and you have to make those decisions. Otherwise, you're, allowing yourself to be subconsciously, um, you know, influenced by
Mhm.
previous belief systems. And it's important to, every couple of years, shake up the box, look through the box, say like, what, how have I allowed this to influence how I view the world around me, the horses around me, the people around me? And is this serving the highest good? Can we actively work to, take that out and then replace it with better information, more, holistic information, more science-based information, modern information, or, spiritually understood information in there?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's also important for people to know that it's not supposed to be comfortable.
Yeah, yeah, it's super uncomfortable, actually. It's very uncomfortable.
And that's like a whole nother piece of it where it's like we've been conditioned from the time we were little to like, oh, don't cry, like be happy, like we're supposed to shut down every other range of emotion that we need to have as humans. And so the moment we feel like something's uncomfortable or uncertain, we kind of want to pull back. And we're just here to say, like, that's when you just stay there. Stay there and get curious when you feel uncomfortable, because, you know, that's where the stuff is sort of being challenged. And I think sometimes people think it means they're on the wrong track. And I'm like, oh, not always.
No, no, and yeah, learning to discern that. That's actually, it's funny. We were saying before the recording started about my husband getting singing lessons for me. And that is the reason why I had expressed to him that I would like to do something that is uncomfortable for me because I know there's a growth, not uncomfortable like ethically or morally, but something that
Right.
requires me to be present with myself and work. And it's that uncomfortable space. And it's also like where you learn so much when you allow yourself grace in that uncomfortable space and like to really sit in it and be like, it's okay. And I've just to share, I felt really lucky that I have a teacher that I feel really comfortable with being uncomfortable around. And I've been able to be like, whoa, like this is too much for me. I need to like pause, or this is too much discomfort for my growth right now. And it's really cool to have that relationship with a teacher. And I think that's what's also so important is we're breaking out of this space where it used to be that you couldn't like ever question anything your teacher said, or you couldn't ever like you had to like step up. And if you were afraid, you have to like swallow that down. You had to just do what they told you anyways. And that's the only way to grow. And it's like that kind of uncomfortableness is not the kind of discomfort that we want when it
Yeah.
comes to growth. That place of discomfort should be like you feel safe to express places with which you feel you're being stretched. And
Mhm.
your mentor, your coach, your trainer, your instructor can be there with you and like hold your hand through that and know how far to push you, but also not to push you too far because when we get too much into that, like you have to change here, then like, same with body work, when you get into that space where you're like, oh, there's a shift that needs to happen and the body goes like, "Ugh, can't you can't push through that. It's not going to get better if you do
Mhm.
that. You have to like step back and like help that body feel safe in order to make that shift, to make that change. And it's the same thing with learning and growing. So being able to be empathetic and kind, that's been a big shift. Not that I was ever like a bully. I used to try to, for the longest time, I'm like, I am an advocate for the horse, and I'm going to be like aggressively, telling people where they're being unethical. And like that's just it's so not conducive to growth and truly like allowing that compassion for people for the discomfort in that growth space and that they can never and will never change if we bulldoze through in that space has really been a super learning experience for me as a teacher over the last, it's been like that specific things like 5 years. Like
Mhm.
I can't just force people to change their mind. I really have to come at it from the same perspective I would if I had a horse at Liberty and offering people that same grace that I offer the horses. Um, but yeah, get uncomfortable, but also find somebody who helps you sit in that discomfort in a comfortable way.
And I think even in the growth in that is like, then you can hold the space for your horses to be there. Then you can hold the space for people around you to be there. And another reason why I feel like I picked all of you, because I feel like that is what we do for each other, when we call each other. How many times I was like, I don't think I deserve to be at this event, but I created it so that I got, and to be able to just say, this is where I'm at right now, and know that every single person has been there and also knows that's not truth. That's just a little bit of your stretch happening and your discomfort, and to be able to express it in a safe space
Mhm.
and giving permission for yourself to be like, oh, I'm like wildly not sure that I should be here, or, working with this horse or this person or at this event or whatever it is, where it's like everybody has been there and everyone can hold the space for each other to be there in it. And I think that's why, like, another reason why I picked you guys, because even at these events, like, you start to sit in you're sitting and you're watching and you're like, oh shit, like I didn't even realize I was doing XYZ. And you're surrounded by other people that are going through the same thing and no one's gonna judge you for it. You're like, yeah, we were there, dude. We were there. You're good. It'll be fine. So yeah.
Love that.
Yeah.
So beautiful.
Yeah. So is there anything else that you need to say so you feel complete?
No, I feel like yeah, I said a lot.
Perfect. It was so good. If people want to learn more about you, where can they find you?
You can find me on Instagram, which I'm hopefully gonna be resurrecting resurrecting a little bit. That's at Unbridled Goddess, and then I'm on Facebook at Unbridled Goddess, or my personal page, which is not really a personal page, it's a business page. It's just Tara Davis. And my ranch page is Rancho de la Diosa on Facebook. And yeah, you can reach me there. You can check out websites at unbridledgoddess.com or ranchodeladiosa.com. Check all that out for all the fun stuff that's going on.
Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you for hanging out.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm so excited for this. This is going to be so good.
I know. I'm so excited to see all of you in real life.
Me too. It's been too long.
I know. All right. We will talk to you later.